Welcome to Virginia U.S. History Standard 2A. This standard attempts to describe the characteristics of early exploration and evaluates the impact of European settlement in the Americas. This description has always struck me as a little broad for what this standard actually covers. By early exploration, we're not going back as far as Columbus and the early European arrivals in the Americas, north and south. We're really looking at the 1600s and the arrival of European settlers on the east coast of what's now the United States, the original 13 colonies. Some essential understanding to help us with this standard. Going back to Columbus and the early arrival of Europeans, European exploration, colonization, and the system of enslavement, the process of making people slaves. Think to your World II class and the slave trade that was covered in that course, resulted in the redistribution. Okay, the movement from one to another, in this case from the Eastern Hemisphere to the Western Hemisphere, of the world's population as millions of people from Europe and Africa voluntarily, in the case of a lot of European settlers, and involuntarily, as in the case of people taken from Africa as slaves, came to the New World. And the New World, referring to North and South America, as mentioned, we're particularly focused in the standard on the east coast of what's now the United States, what become known as the 13 original colonies. Okay, so geographically, we're looking at the area here in red, the 13, or now 13 states, which originally were the 13 colonies. Again, on the American flag, the representation of those 13 original colonies in the 13 stripes on the flag. Each state today has its own star, but those original 13, in addition to the star, are represented in those 13 red and white stripes. Those colonies are really broken down into three geographic regions that will work through north to south. We'll start with the New England colonies, and these are colonies, we're referring here to Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire. These colonies were largely settled for religious purposes. The main thing we want to know about the early settlement of the New England colonies is that their settlement was largely for religious purposes. They were mainly settled by a religious group called Puritans. We hear in that word Puritans the word pure. These were very devout, very strict religious people from England who felt that the Church of England, the Anglican Church, wasn't pure enough. They thought there was too much fancy stuff, there was too much ceremony. They wanted a much more basic and simple form of religion. They were being persecuted in Europe. They were being treated badly and picked on. They were going against the official government religion, and therefore they sought refuge. They sought safety. They sought a place to practice their religion in the New World. Okay, and they landed up in the New England colonies, and there they formed a covenant community. And covenant community refers to people who live together. They agreed to live together and abide or follow religious law. So again, the key idea here, these New England colonies were very much founded for and based on religion, based on the principles of the Mayflower Compact. Okay, if you're familiar with the Pilgrims who came over, the first Thanksgiving story, before stepping foot on Plymouth Rock, they agreed to a set of principles, a set of rules called the Mayflower Compact, and these were largely based on Puritan religious beliefs. Again, those very strict Christian religious beliefs that they didn't feel free to practice and live by in England. They saw the opportunity to practice their religion in New England. Okay, and there they practiced a form of direct democracy. If you go all the way back to your World One class, you learned about direct democracy when you learned about the ancient Greeks, where decisions are voted on by all. It's not representative democracy where people elect representatives to vote. In small communities, tight-knit communities like these, everybody could vote on every issue affecting the community. So they held town hall meetings, okay, and they practiced direct democracy where each member, each adult male member of the community at the time was able to vote on issues affecting the community. Despite all this, the Puritans and the New England colonies, they tended to be intolerant of those not sharing their religion, meaning they didn't allow for differences and they treated very harshly any kind of dissent. In fact, a lot of the colonies were founded by dissenters in New England, Puritans who uh, dissented with other Puritans in Massachusetts, went on to found Rhode Island and Connecticut. We associate the New England colonies with things like the Salem witchcraft trials, Nathaniel Hawthorne's famous book, The Scarlet Letter, about a woman who had committed adultery and had to wear a big letter A, whenever she was out. That kind of strict religious belief often led to intolerance or not allowing differences. So those are our New England colonies. We'll move down the coast now to the Middle Atlantic colonies. Okay, the Middle Atlantic colonies, we want to think of them as a mix of religion and economic founding. They were settled by a much more diverse group than the New England colonies. The New England colonies largely founded by settlers from England. Here we have diverse group of English, Dutch, German-speaking immigrants arriving in large numbers early on. Diverse meaning they're different, they're not the same. Okay, there was more of a mix of people in the Middle Atlantic colonies. Likewise, there was diverse reasons for their founding. Unlike the New England colonies, which were largely founded for religious reasons, the Middle Atlantic colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, they were a mix of economic opportunity, people looking to make money and a better life for themselves, and also religious freedom. Colonies like New York, for example, they were pretty much founded for economic gain, people wanting to make money, a better life for themselves. Even Middle Atlantic colonies like Pennsylvania that were founded for a particular religious group, the Quakers were the religious group Pennsylvania was founded for, there was much more of an economic interest, making money as well as a place to practice a religion than there was in the New England colonies. So it's a mix of economic and religious. Okay, and now our southern colonies. Okay, and unlike the New England colonies, the southern colonies really were founded by people seeking economic opportunity. Okay, there was much less of a religious foundation of our southern colonies. We're referring here to Virginia, North and South Carolina, the colonies really from Virginia on south. Um, some of our early Virginia settlers, and being a Virginia U.S. history course, we want to focus here. Many of the early settlers to Virginia were Cavaliers. Back to your World II class, that term Cavalier should be familiar from the English Civil War. These were those loyal to the king. These were nobles. Okay, people who were from the privileged families of England, and they were often given large land grants in the eastern part of Virginia, what geographically we call the Tidewater region of Virginia. Big uh, pieces of land where they set up big plantations, and they were given these pieces of land from the king for their loyalty. Okay, kind of an example of this would be the Fairfax grant, kind of where we are here. You can see the red dot there on the map, roughly where those in my class listening to this are located. All of that land there shaded in, both in the reddish and the light orange beige color there in West Virginia. All those counties were all given by the King of England to a Thomas Fairfax, okay, Lord Fairfax. Again, for my students nearby, he also had the name he also had the title Baron of Cameron. Again, we have a street nearby, Baron Cameron Avenue. He got all of that land there, stretching all the way from the Chesapeake Bay, all the way up past us here in Fairfax, all the way out into West Virginia. It was over 5 million acres of land, okay, simply for being loyal to the king. Okay, so big chunks of land being handed out to noble families who are loyal to the king. Okay, again, our nobility are the privileged families. But we also had the arrival of poor English immigrants as well, people who weren't noble. And we had a movement through Virginia, whereas the nobles kind of grabbed the best farming land in the Tidewater close to the Atlantic and the Piedmont area, the poor immigrants had to push further into the mountainous areas. Okay, and there they found land and places to farm in the Shenandoah Valley. We see there on the map. Again, those in my class, if you were to take Route 66 all the way out to its west, all the way to the end, it eventually hits Interstate 81. And Interstate 81 pretty much runs up and down the Shenandoah Valley. Okay, and further west into Western Virginia, what after around the Civil War time becomes West Virginia. Some other poor immigrants from England, they also agreed to work as indentured servants. And an indentured servant was a worker who agreed to work for a noble, for a plantation owner, for a length of time, usually about 7 years, in exchange for their passage being paid to the New World. Okay, so in other words, they exchanged their labor for a ticket on a boat to come across the Atlantic Ocean, and after a period of time, then they would be free to pursue their own economic interests. Okay, we want to know, Virginia, also the location of the first permanent English settlement in North America called Jamestown. Okay, so down southeastern Virginia, those of you who've gone down around Virginia Beach, Newport News, Hampton Roads area down there. Okay, the settlement at Jamestown was established by the Virginia Company of London as a business venture. Okay, they saw this as an opportunity to make money. Okay, tobacco was going to be the cash crop that grew very well there and was hopefully, from the Virginia Company's point of view, going to make them lots of money. This was not the first settlement in the United States. It was the first permanent English settlement. The English had attempted before places like the barrier islands of North Carolina. There were some attempts. We also had the Spanish, for example, down in Florida before, but the first permanent English settlement in North America we want to know as Jamestown. Okay, permanent meaning it lasted for a long time. It didn't don't go away in a year. And the other thing we want to know for this is at Jamestown was established the Virginia House of Burgesses. This was the government of the colony. Established by the 1640s, originally at Jamestown, later on it was located to Williamsburg. It was the first elected assembly in the New World. It was the first time people voted for their representatives. And Virginia's claim to fame here in terms of colonial government, it's operated continuously, meaning it's been since the beginning there in the 1640s and still today. Today it goes by a different name. It's the General Assembly of Virginia. And that wraps up what we need to know for Standard 2A.